At 16, my parents cut my cancer treatment fund to pay for my brother's sports academy, calling me an unfortunate expense. They tried to discharge me behind my back, so I recorded everything, took them to court, and watched their entire world collapse. Hey Reddit! My parents made it clear my brother mattered, and I didn't. I tried to live my own life, but they dragged me back into their chaos. Here's how everything really started. My name's Rylan Hale. I was 16 at the time, and most of my life, I've been the kind of kid people forget about. Not in a tragic, movie-like way, just the background character in my own house. My brother Talon was the star. Everything revolved around him. His training, his performances, his future. I learned early that the best way to stay out of trouble was to need nothing, ask for nothing, and solve everything alone. I didn't think that mindset would end up saving my life. It started slow, a bruise on my shin I didn't remember getting, then another one, then waking up tired no matter how much I slept. I'd climb the stairs and feel like I'd run a mile. My mom, Mara, would barely look up from slicing fruit for Talon's protein shakes. Stop being dramatic, Rylan. You're not a child anymore. And the school nurse sent home a printed note saying I should get blood work done. Mara tossed it in the trash like it was junk mail. A second note came 2 weeks later. My dad, Brent, signed declined and told me to stop inventing problems. Talon's got a tournament Saturday, he said. Like that was a reason I couldn't get medical testing. I didn't push it. I was used to pushing nothing. I was working a shift at the warehouse when things finally caught up to me. I bent to pick up a box, nothing heavy, and my whole body felt like it dropped out from under me. The floor came at me sideways. Someone yelled my name, then the world blinked. When I woke up, the lights were too bright, and everything smelled like plastic. I heard someone talking fast near my head. When I turned, Trevor, a nurse with a military haircut and the kind of eyes that didn't miss things, was there. Stay with me, he said. At the hospital, everything happened in a blur. Blood draws, IV lines, monitors. Doctor, Atwood came in with this careful, sad expression and told me I had leukemia. Advanced, but treatable. My parents showed up hours later, acting like they were starring in their own inspirational documentary. Mara cried into tissues. Brent squeezed my shoulder dramatically. They posted things online like, our fighter boy is strong. Family first. People commented heart emojis and sending prayers. It felt fake, but for a little while it was at least attention. I started chemo. It was rough. Nausea, weakness, headaches, metallic taste in my mouth that wouldn't go away. But Dr. Atwood said my numbers were improving. I held on to that like a lifeline. Then Talon's acceptance letter came. The National Athlete Development Academy. The kind of program my parents basically built their whole personalities around. Suddenly, their visits to my room got shorter. They'd sit with their backs half-turned while scrolling through academy costs on their phones. Brent kept muttering about financial strain. Mara kept sighing like someone had burdened her with extra laundry. I didn't want to admit it, but I knew what was coming. The day they finally said it, I remember the air feeling heavy, like the room knew before I did. I was sitting up in bed, half-tired, blanket over my legs. Brent and Mara came in together, which they only did when something serious was happening. Their faces were stiff, determined. Mara set down a folder. Rylan, we need to talk. Brent crossed his arms like this was some office meeting and not a conversation about my life. Talon needs our full support for the academy, Mara said. It's a huge opportunity. I nodded slowly. Okay, but what does that have to do with me? Brent let out this long sigh like he was exhausted from explaining life to a child. We can't afford to keep splitting everything. Your treatment has already gone on for weeks. You're stable. You've gotten enough rounds. I stared at him. I'm only halfway. Stop dramatizing, Mara cut in. You always exaggerate your issues. The words hit harder than I expected. Something in my chest went cold. My hands were shaking, but I kept them under the blanket as I reached for my phone and hit record. I didn't even think. It just happened. Some part of me knew I'd need proof. Mara softened her voice, which somehow made everything worse. Honey, you're 16, old enough to understand hard truths. Talon's future is at stake. We can't sacrifice that. Sacrifice. She actually used that word. Behind them, I saw movement in the doorway. Trevor was standing there, pretending to check a chart, but completely focused on what they were saying. His jaw tightened. For a second, nobody spoke. Then my parents walked out like they had just finished discussing weekend plans. When the door shut, the room felt colder. Trevor stepped in. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't pretend it was fine. He just said, low and steady, keep that recording. Don't lose it. I nodded because my throat didn't work. That was the moment I finally understood something clearly. My parents weren't confused or stressed or overwhelmed. They'd done the math, and I was the one they were willing to subtract. After everything that happened in the hospital, after hearing my parents say out loud that I wasn't worth the cost of my own treatment, I lay awake thinking about how long this had really been building. People don't just wake up one day and decide their kid is expendable. That kind of thinking grows slowly, almost quietly, in the background of a family. And when I looked back at my childhood, I realized it wasn't complicated. There were two moments that said everything about who my parents were and who I was supposed to be. The first one was when I was 12. Our old SUV wouldn't start, and my dad, Brent, decided it was a teach a man to fish moment, except it wasn't teaching. It was him standing in the driveway yelling instructions at me like I was a mechanic who'd messed up his order. Talon was inside playing a sports video game because his hands were too valuable to risk scratches. Those were my dad's exact words. I remember sliding under the SUV, gravel digging into my back, not even really knowing what I was supposed to be checking. Brent kept shouting things like, "Loosen the right bolt," even though there were like 15 identical bolts down there. I tried anyway, and the wrench slipped. My arm hit a sharp edge under the engine, and a cut opened instantly. Deep, bleeding fast, stinging so hard it took my breath away. I scrambled out, holding my arm, blood running down to my elbow. Brent didn't move toward me, didn't ask if I was okay. He just muttered, "Unbelievable," like I'd inconvenienced him. Mara came out a minute later. She took one look at me, then rolled her eyes. "Rylan, stop with the theatrics. Talon needs to leave soon, and we don't have time for this." I remember standing there, shaking, towel pressed against my arm, realizing they weren't going to take me inside, or clean the cut, or even ask what happened. So I went to the bathroom, rinsed it out, wrapped it with paper towels, and kept quiet because silence was easier. The second moment happened 2 years later. I'd entered a regional science fair and ended up winning first place. No one expected it. Not my teachers, not my classmates, definitely not my parents. It felt like the first thing that belonged to me. Something I worked for that had nothing to do with Talon. The award ceremony was on a Thursday night. I asked Mara and Brent if they could come. Mara said, "If Talon doesn't have conditioning," already knowing he did. Talon always had something. He had a whole calendar built around him like a solar system. They didn't show, not even a text. When they announced my name, I walked on stage and looked at an empty seat. Other kids had parents cheering, taking pictures, crying happy tears. Mine were probably timing Talon's sprints at the training center. When the event ended, I waited out front like maybe they'd surprise me. They didn't. I was about to start walking home when Coach Navarro spotted me. He asked if I had a ride. I said no. He didn't make a big deal of it, just nodded and said, "All right, get in." He didn't even pry. That somehow made it worse, that he wasn't shocked I was standing there alone. That night I hung the certificate on my wall, but it felt like putting a trophy in a dark closet. No one saw it except me. After remembering those moments, something clicked in my head. It didn't make me angry yet, not in a loud way. It was more like a cold, steady feeling settling in. This understanding that whatever came next, I couldn't rely on them for anything. If I wanted to live through this, I'd have to stop hoping they'd change, because they already showed me who they were. And now it was my turn to show them I wasn't as easy to erase as they thought. Getting diagnosed with leukemia didn't feel dramatic. It felt cold and clinical. Some days I swore my bones were dissolving from the inside. Foggy head, heavy limbs, and that metallic taste that wouldn't leave. Dr. Atwood kept pointing at tiny improvements like they were stepping stones across a river. "You're responding," he told me. "We just need to stay consistent." My parents heard the same words and translated them into something else. Time, money, inconvenience. Over the next week, things changed fast. My parents' visits got shorter. Their attention drifted. They spent more time in the hallway talking with billing staff than sitting with me. One afternoon, I overheard a tense, whispered conversation with a hospital administrator. Their voices carried through the thin walls. "Brent, there has to be a cheaper way to handle this." Administrator: "Cheaper? This is the required protocol," I heard. Mara: "Well, we need to adjust something. Our other son has opportunities." Hearing that made something inside me sink, but I tried to tell myself it was just poor wording. People say dumb things when stressed. A few days later, Dr. Atwood came in with new charts, smiling faintly. "Your numbers look good, Rylan, but it's critical we complete the full course. Stopping early would be extremely dangerous." He said it with that careful tone doctors use when they want to make sure everyone understands the seriousness. My parents exchanged a look behind his back. I caught it. A quick, tight expression that wasn't fear, it was frustration. After he stepped out, I stared at them, waiting for reassurance. Mara just said, "You heard him. It's a long, expensive process." Brent added, "There's only so much we can do, son." Those lines stuck with me because of how casually they said them. That night, something strange happened. A hospital admin left a packet of files on the counter while checking my IV pump. I didn't mean to look, but my own name printed in bold caught my eye. On the page below it, a line read, "Request for responsible party transfer. Denied." The date was 6 months old. 6 months ago, I wasn't even sick. 6 months ago, I was working after school, saving money for a used car, completely unaware that my parents were filing paperwork about my medical decisions. When Trevor came in later, I pointed at it. "What does that mean?" I whispered. He froze, just for a beat. Then he stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "It means somebody tried to move your medical decision-making away from your parents." "To who?" His jaw flexed. "I don't know yet, and I'm not guessing. But why would they do that?" Trevor stared at the paper again, like he wanted to burn a hole through it. "Because they were planning," he said quietly. "Keep your head down. Don't mention this to them. And when the social worker comes back, you tell her you saw it." Then he looked me dead in the face. "And if you can get a photo of that page, do it." I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at the ceiling, letting everything rearrange itself in my head. My parents were planning something long before the diagnosis. That's why nothing felt accidental. That's why their reactions seemed rehearsed. They weren't overwhelmed by my illness. They were annoyed by it. The morning after my parents told me they were done paying for my treatment, everything felt different. I knew I was on my own. The first thing I did was replay the recording I'd taken under the blanket. Hearing their voices again, calm, practical, almost cheerful while cutting off my chance at living, made my stomach twist. But it didn't make me cry. It just confirmed what I needed to do. I opened the Notes app on my phone and started writing everything down. Dates, symptoms, things they'd said, conversations I remembered, how they treated me before the diagnosis. Not because I had a plan yet, but because I needed a record. If they could rewrite reality so easily, I wasn't going to leave anything to memory. A few hours later, Trevor came in to check my vitals. He usually had this tough, unbothered vibe, but that morning he looked like someone who'd seen a car drifting toward a cliff and realized the driver didn't care. "You good?" he asked, even though he already knew the answer. "Not really," I said. He nodded once. "All right, then let's figure something out." I didn't know what he meant, but I followed his lead. When he finished checking my blood pressure, he shut the room door quietly behind him and spoke in a tone I'd never heard from him before. Low and controlled. "Your parents can't legally pull you from treatment if it places you in immediate danger," he said. "But you're a minor, so the hospital has to prove neglect." I swallowed. How do you prove something like that? Trevor tapped the back of my phone through the blanket. "You already started." That was the first moment I felt a tiny spark of something that might have been hope. Later that afternoon, Cecilia, the hospital social worker, walked into my room with a clipboard and a look that said she wasn't here to play pretend. She sat down in the chair next to my bed and didn't even bother with small talk. "I need to understand your situation clearly," she said. "From your perspective, start to finish." I told her everything. My parents' shift in behavior, Talon's academy acceptance, the way they phrased their decision, and how they acted like my life was a negotiation. Cecilia didn't interrupt. She wrote fast, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she set down her pen and said, "I'm going to request your file history. I want to see if there were earlier warning signs." Warning signs? I didn't even know what that meant. She returned the next morning holding a thin beige folder. She closed the door behind her. "Rylan," she said softly, "your parents filed a responsible party transfer request 6 months ago." "So the date I saw wasn't a glitch," I said. My stomach turned. 6 months ago? I wasn't even sick. She flipped open the folder. "They attempted to assign medical authority over you to your cousin, Dorian Hale." My chest tightened. "Why him?" "We don't know. But the request was denied because minors can only have decision transfers in specific circumstances. Still, the attempt itself is concerning. I didn't know whether to laugh or throw up. My parents were planning something long before they had a reason. At least before I thought they had a reason. But it wasn't even the worst part. Cecilia slid out another sheet. "I also contacted your school nurse. According to her, she sent home 2 referrals recommending immediate blood work. I already felt sick, but hearing that made me dizzy." "They ignored them?" I asked quietly. "Yes," she said. "Your mother threw one away and your father declined the second. You needed tests months before you collapsed." Something inside me cracked. Not loudly, just enough to change the shape of who I was. By evening, things escalated faster than I expected. Dr. Atwood stormed into my room holding paperwork. Actual paper, not the tablet he usually carried. His forehead was creased. "Your father," he said, "submitted a discharge request." I felt the blood drain from my face. Trevor was right behind him, shaking his head. "We intercepted it." Dr. Atwood put the papers on my tray table, like they were radioactive. "Stopping treatment now is medically catastrophic," he said. "I am filing an emergency report." His voice didn't waver. Mine did when I whispered, "They really don't care if I live." Cecilia arrived minutes later, already dialing numbers on her phone. "Rylan," she said, "we're moving forward with legal action. I need your permission to proceed." I nodded. They'd made their choice. Now I was making mine. I thought hospitals were stressful. I thought chemo was stressful. Turns out none of that compares to being shoved into a cramped county courtroom at 8 in the morning while your parents storm around like they're the victims of a conspiracy. The hearing was only scheduled because Cecilia moved mountains to get it pushed through immediately. My next chemo cycle was days away. If we didn't get emergency medical authority granted, I'd be discharged into a slow death someone else chose for me. They told me I was stable enough to be transported, which didn't mean I felt fine. It meant my numbers weren't low enough to collapse in the parking lot. Dr. Atwood ordered a wheelchair. Trevor insisted on coming along, and Cecilia pushed through the emergency hearing like the building was on fire. The courthouse lobby felt colder than the hospital. I was wrapped in a hospital blanket with the IV dressing still on my arm. Trevor stood behind my wheelchair, hands tight on the handles, scanning the room like he expected a threat. Cecilia walked ahead with her stack of files. I felt exposed, like everyone was staring at the sick kid being wheeled into battle. But I also felt something weirdly solid under that humiliation. I wasn't doing this alone. My parents were already there. Mara was pacing in small circles, like she was rehearsing a speech. Brent stood stiffly beside her, jaw tight, face red. When they saw me in the wheelchair, their expressions didn't soften. If anything, they hardened, like my physical condition was an inconvenience. Mira's voice cracked as she rushed toward me. "Rylan, what is this? They dragged you out here? You're too fragile." Trevor stepped in front of her without saying a word. Just one look from him made her stop mid-step. Brent pointed at Cecilia. "This is manipulation. They're turning him against us." Cecilia didn't even blink. "We're going in." Inside the courtroom, the judge took one look at me, pale, blanket over my legs, breathing heavier than I wanted, and her expression shifted. Not pity, recognition. She understood why we were here. The hearing started immediately. Cecilia presented the petition first. She laid out the timeline, the ignored referrals, the discharge attempt. Her voice was concise, professional, and merciless. Then, Dr. Atwood stepped forward and handed over my charts. He spoke calmly but firmly, explaining my diagnosis, how I'd responded to treatment so far, and how stopping now would almost certainly end my life. "This is not optional," he said. "His survival depends on completing the protocol." My parents' lawyer sprang up like he was waiting for his cue. "My clients are scared parents. They're overwhelmed. Anyone would be. They're not malicious. They simply cannot afford excessive, unnecessary treatment. The hospital is—" The judge cut him off. "Stick to facts, not opinions." Brent jumped in anyway. "We're being taken advantage of. They're extending treatment for profit." Mara added, "Rylan always exaggerates his symptoms. He's impressionable. These people are feeding him lies." Trevor's hands tightened on my wheelchair handles. Navarro, who had slipped in quietly and taken a seat behind us, leaned forward slightly like he might intervene. I already knew about the transfer request, but hearing it spoken into a courtroom record made it feel uglier, official. Cecilia didn't tell them anything we hadn't already lived. She just made it official. "Your Honor, I have documentation showing the parents attempted to transfer medical decision-making authority over their son to a cousin 6 months before diagnosis." The judge looked up slowly. 6 months? Cecilia handed over the form. "Yes, the department denied it immediately, but the attempt itself is concerning." The room went dead still. The only thing I heard was my heartbeat and the faint hum of the courtroom lights. Mara broke first. "It was precautionary! Families prepare for emergencies!" The judge's voice flattened. "You attempted to assign his medical authority to someone outside your household without cause." Brent tried to back it up. "It was responsible planning." "No," the judge snapped. "It was suspicious." Cecilia wasn't done. She handed over the school nurse referrals, the ones Brent and Mara ignored. If they had followed medical advice, Rylan's leukemia could have been caught much earlier. The judge's jaw tightened. "You ignored both medical referrals?" Mara started crying loudly. "We had commitments. Talon had training." Brent slammed a hand on the table. "We can't neglect our other son's future." The judge stared at them like she'd just discovered a moldy sandwich in her desk. Then the final hit came. Cecilia presented the discharge request Brent filed behind my back. They attempted to terminate life-saving treatment during active response. My parents' lawyer tried to talk. The judge cut him off again. "Stop. Your clients attempted to end necessary treatment prematurely." "This is not a debate." Everything broke loose at once. Brent yelled, "This is corruption!" Mara cried, "He's being poisoned against us!" Someone in the back gasped. The bailiff moved closer. Navarro stood halfway up, fists clenched. Trevor shifted like he was ready to restrain someone if needed. The judge banged her gavel so hard the crack echoed. "Sit down, both of you." They didn't sit. Brent kept ranting. Mara kept sobbing and pointing at me like I was the one tearing the family apart by refusing to quietly die. Finally, the judge leaned forward. "Effective immediately, the court grants the hospital temporary medical decision-making authority for Rylan's oncology care. His parents may not consent to, refuse, delay, or alter treatment, and they may not attempt to discharge. A social services investigation will be opened. Any interference will be treated as a violation of this order." Mara's scream was raw. "You can't take him from us!" "He's not being taken," the judge said coldly. "He's being protected." As the bailiff escorted them out, Brent shouted, "You're destroying this family!" Navarro muttered behind me, "They did that themselves." When the door slammed, the room fell silent except for my uneven breathing. Cecilia put a hand gently on my shoulder. "You did the right thing coming today." Maybe. But as I sat there wrapped in a hospital blanket, exhausted and shaking, all I could think was, this wasn't victory. This was survival. And it wasn't over yet. After the court stripped my parents of medical authority, everyone kept telling me I was safe now. Like the danger had been legal paperwork instead of the people who raised me. But here's the thing nobody seemed to understand. My parents weren't the type to accept losing control. Not quietly, not gracefully. They didn't think they'd done anything wrong, which made them 10 times more unpredictable. Under the emergency order, the hospital became my temporary medical custodian, and social services placed me in medically supervised transitional housing, 10 minutes from oncology. It wasn't homey, but it was mine. And for the first time in my life, when I closed a door, it stayed closed. Moving in wasn't peaceful, though. Cecilia insisted we transfer my belongings while my parents were at work, but either they came home early or they'd been watching the house. Because halfway through packing my clothes, all 3 drawers worth, I heard a car door slam outside, hard. Then the front door flung open. Mara's voice carried down the hallway like a siren. "What do you think you're doing?" Trevor was beside me instantly. He had volunteered to help with the move, claiming he needed fresh air, but I think he just didn't trust the situation. Navarro was carrying a box of books out the back. Talon wasn't home. He'd warned me earlier he'd try to keep them away, but apparently that failed. My parents came storming into the room, both flushed, both furious. Brent's eyes were bloodshot like he'd been yelling before he even walked in. Mara pointed at the half-packed box. "You can't just leave. This is your home." I stayed seated on the edge of the bed because I knew if I stood, my legs would give out. Chemo had a way of slapping you down exactly when you needed strength. Trevor stepped between us. "He has a court order. He's moving to medically supervised housing." "This is kidnapping," Brent snapped. "It's compliance," Trevor replied, dead calm. The tension in the room snapped like a stretched rubber band. Mara lunged, not hitting me, but grabbing the clothes out of the box with frantic, jerky movements, like if she put everything back fast enough the court ruling would reverse itself. Brent grabbed one of my backpacks and hurled it across the room. Navarro re-entered just in time to see it hit the wall. "Hey," he warned, stepping forward. "Stop!" Brent whipped around. "This is a family matter. Stay out of it." Navarro held his ground. "You made it my matter when you endangered one of my students." For a second, I thought Brent might swing at him, his fists balled up, shoulders tense. But Trevor shifted subtly, just enough to remind everyone he was the only one in the room trained to restrain people. My parents backed down, but not in defeat, more like a tactical retreat. As I was wheeled out of the house, Mara called after me, voice breaking, "You're choosing strangers over your own family." I didn't answer, partly because I didn't have the energy, mostly because it wasn't true. They'd stopped being family the moment they started calculating my worth. The transitional apartment was quiet, unsettlingly quiet at first. The window faced a small courtyard with a couple of trees. A nurse came once a day to check vitals. My meds were labeled in a neat little box like I was some kind of science project. After the chaos of the courthouse and my parents' meltdown, the silence felt unreal, but it didn't last long. The first sign something was off happened 3 nights after I moved in. I woke up to the sound of the doorknob rattling, soft but intentional. Someone testing it. I froze, listening. The door was locked. I always double-checked. My chest tightened as the rattling went silent. Then came again, slower this time. I reached for my phone, but my hands were shaking too hard to unlock it. After a few seconds that felt like hours, the sound stopped. The next morning, I found a footprint on the welcome mat, bigger than mine. Not from any nurse or staff. I knew their shoes by then. Cecilia didn't dismiss it. She didn't tell me I was paranoid. She sighed like she'd been waiting for this part. "Okay," she said. "We do it the boring way. Police report, new locks, a door alarm, and we start a paper trail so nobody can pretend this didn't happen." She paused, eyes sharp. Harassment cases aren't won with one scary moment. They're won with patterns. But it didn't stop. 2 days later, I returned from blood work to find my apartment door slightly open. My first thought was keys. Staff keys, maintenance keys, the kind of access that exists in any medical building. The kind you don't notice until you need to fear it. Trevor checked the lock with a controlled kind of anger. "We're rekeying today," he said, "and you're getting a door sensor. No more mystery. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was broken. But someone had gone through my drawers, neatly, like they wanted me to know they were there without causing visible damage." Trevor walked through the apartment with his arms crossed, jaw tight. This was a message. I didn't ask who from. We both knew. Then came the cousin problem. I spotted Dorian Hale, the same cousin my parents tried to give medical authority to, standing outside the hospital entrance one afternoon, leaning casually against a pillar like he was waiting for someone. He watched me get wheeled inside. Didn't wave, didn't smile, just watched. When our eyes met, he mouthed something. 3 slow words. "We'll fix this." I told Cecilia before my chair wheels even stopped squeaking. She didn't look shocked. She looked tired, like this was the next square on a board she'd already mapped. She made one call. 10 minutes later, hospital security approached Dorian with that polite, professional smile that doesn't mean kindness. It means liability. He argued at first, hands out, innocent voice. But the guard's posture didn't change. Dorian left, and as he walked away, he looked back at me like the hallway was still his. Cecilia filed a trespass notice the same day. So the next time he showed up, it wouldn't be a misunderstanding. It would be a violation. Then her face went cold. "I'm filing harassment notices today." Talon visited me a few times a week, always looking exhausted from navigating the aftermath at home. He said things were spiraling fast, that Mara had started telling relatives I was being held hostage, and Brent was claiming the hospital falsified records. Extended family was split between ignoring them and feeding their delusions. Talon said quietly one night, "They'll blame you forever, you know." I looked at him. "For what? Not dying?" He swallowed hard. "Yeah, my second to last chemo cycle hit harder than the earlier ones. I spent most days pressed into the pillows, weak and dizzy, but mentally I was sharper than ever. Every bit of chaos confirmed that I'd done the right thing. That leaving wasn't betrayal, it was survival." One night, when I was half asleep, my phone buzzed. An unknown number, a voicemail. I shouldn't have listened to it, but I did. Mara's voice, distorted with fury, whispered, "You won't get away with this. Families stay together." I didn't delete it. My thumb hovered over the option for a full second. Pure instinct, pure disgust. Then I stopped. Trevor's voice flashed through my head. "Keep everything." I forwarded it to Cecilia and saved a backup like I was storing poison in a jar. The final hearing was scheduled for Wednesday morning. Not to re-argue whether I needed chemo, because that had already been decided. This one was about long-term authority, and whether the court would finally put a hard wall between me and my parents, but Cecilia told me not to think of it like the court you see in movies. "It's procedure," she said. "We already proved the emergency part. This one just finalizes everything." She said it like we weren't walking straight into a storm everyone knew was coming. The days leading up to it felt stretched thin. My last chemo round hit harder than any before, like my body was fighting the treatment and the disease at the same time. My bones ached deep, my stomach was unpredictable, and getting out of bed felt like dragging myself through thick mud. But I kept reminding myself, after this, I had a chance at remission. A real one. Talon came by 2 nights before the hearing. He looked worn down. Dark circles, stiff shoulders, the kind of exhaustion you don't get from training drills. He brought groceries from the store he worked at and sat across from me while I forced down soup. He didn't talk for a long time. Then he said quietly, "They think you're going to ruin their lives." I set the spoon down. I didn't do anything except refuse to die for free. He didn't argue, just nodded, like he finally understood something he'd been avoiding for years. Before he left, he hesitated in the doorway. "Whatever happens Wednesday," he said. "I'm testifying." I didn't realize how much relief that gave me until after he left, and I could finally breathe again. The morning of the hearing, the hospital arranged for wheelchair transport again. Trevor insisted on accompanying me. "You're not going without medical backup," he'd said, and Navarro followed behind in his car. Cecilia had already left early to prep. As they wheeled me into the courthouse, I felt that heavy pressure again, the same one from the emergency hearing, but now it felt sharper, more focused, like the building itself was bracing for impact. My parents were already inside, and the moment they saw me, everything cracked open. Mara shot out of her seat so fast the chair tipped. Her makeup was smudged, hair a mess. "Rylan, honey," she cried, rushing toward the wheelchair. "You don't have to do this. We can fix everything." Trevor stepped in front of her, blocking the path without touching her. "Back up." Brent rose right after her, jaw tight, eyes glaring at everyone except me. "This is pointless. He's been brainwashed." Navarro snorted, not quietly. The judge was different this time. A woman with gray hair pulled tight, glasses perched low on her nose, the kind of presence that made grown adults sit straighter. The second she took her seat, my parents' lawyer jumped to his feet. "Your Honor, before we begin," she cut him off. "Sit down. We have a full docket, and this case has already taken more of the court's time than necessary." It was the first time I'd seen my parents' lawyer obey anything instantly. The judge looked at me first. "Rylan, do you understand the petition you filed?" My voice was raspy from chemo, but steady. "Yes, ma'am." "And you wish to continue without parental involvement?" "Yes." She nodded, then turned to the stack of documents Cecilia provided. Medical records, social worker reports, the ignored school referrals, the attempted authority transfer, the discharge request, the harassment notes, the security complaints. A mountain of evidence, every page another nail in the coffin of my parents' credibility. Then came testimony. Dr. Atwood explained my prognosis, the survival odds with continued treatment, and the near certainty of relapse if treatment were cut short. He didn't dramatize it. He didn't soften it. He delivered the truth like a scalpel. Cecilia explained the documented patterns of neglect, calmly but firmly. She presented typed notes, timelines, summaries, witness accounts. Mara whispered angrily the whole time, but the judge ignored her. Trevor testified next. He kept it short. "I saw things no kid should have to deal with. I saw decisions that weren't decisions so much as calculated indifference. And I saw how fast they tried to abandon him the moment another son's opportunity came up." Then the judge asked if anyone else wished to speak. Talon stood. My parents froze like someone had hit them with a stun gun. He walked to the front slowly. Not dramatic, not shaking, just steady. When he spoke, his voice cracked once, but he didn't stop. "They always chose me," he said. "Every time. Every day. And I didn't know how bad it was until all of this." He turned toward our parents. "You told me I had to accept it because I was the priority. That's what you called it." Brent muttered, "Talon, sit down. Alan, don't embarrass yourself." But he kept going. "You tried to end his treatment so I could go to an academy. Do you hear how insane that sounds? He almost died because you didn't want to pay for him." Mara's voice shot out, ragged and sharp. "We did what we had to do for the future of this family." The judge slammed her gavel. "One more outburst and you will be removed." Talon finished quietly. "Rylan deserves to live. That should have been enough." And he stepped back. For the first time, my parents looked genuinely stunned, not from guilt, but from the realization that the child they valued had broken rank. The judge picked up her ruling and spoke without hesitation. "Given the overwhelming evidence of medical neglect and attempted interference with care, the court grants Rylan the right to consent to his own oncology treatment and appoints the hospital as the temporary medical guardian for all cancer-related decisions, including treatment, records access, insurance communication, and billing coordination. His parents are barred from contacting providers, accessing medical information, or attempting to alter his care in any way." Mara gasped like she'd been stabbed. Brent stood up, fists clenched. The judge wasn't done. "Additionally, a restraining order will be issued. You will not contact Rylan in person, by phone, or through third parties. Social services will conduct a full investigation into your household. If any further harassment occurs, you may face criminal charges." Mara started sobbing. Brent began shouting something about conspiracies again. The bailiff stepped in before anything escalated. They were escorted out, still screaming, still convinced they were the ones being wronged. When the doors closed behind them, the room went quiet. Real quiet. Not the heavy, tense kind. I exhaled slowly. Trevor placed a steady hand on my shoulder. Navarro nodded. Cecilia smiled faintly. Talon sat beside me, eyes red, hands clenched but steady. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something close to relief. Not victory, just release. Like the weight that had been crushing me finally cracked. Later that night, back in my apartment, I lined up 3 things on my bookshelf. The court order, the bullet from the SUV I scraped my arm under at 12, and the little notebook where I documented everything. 3 pieces of proof. 3 reminders of who I'd been and who I'd become. They spent years preparing a future without me. I survived long enough to build my own. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.